Zach is back. It's the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Welcome back in. Time right now in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates Studios, 4:15, Zach Gelb Show. As we roll along on a Tuesday, 609-919-9200. A real treat now joins the show, and that's Paul Domowitch, who's been covering the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm pretty sure, longer than I've been alive for the Philadelphia Daily News. And Paul is kind enough to give us a few minutes right now. Paul, Zach Gelb, appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
Good, Zach. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. So the big topic of conversation after the debacle in Seattle has been Nelson Agholor. Back-to-back awful plays. You know what happened. Didn't line up correctly, and then drops a football that would have been a 20-plus yard gain. We've heard his frustration after the game. He's down on himself from the pressure that's occurring here in Philadelphia. Let me ask you, should Nelson Agholor be on the field on Monday night?
He should be on the field, but for less snaps than he's been on the field for more recently. I mean, clearly he's kind of becoming he's not helping them, but they don't have a lot of other options. I know they promoted Paul Turner from the practice squad, but Paul Turner's just a guy. I mean, there's a reason he's been on the practice squad for the entire season. So, I mean, what they need to do is not trust Nelson Agholor as blindly as they have, but still try to get something out of him. I mean, he's not a bad player. He's just, his confidence right now is just totally shot.
And when you're playing in a big city and everyone lives, sleeps, and breathes Philadelphia Eagles, when you make mistakes at this level, they're going to be magnified and everyone's going to be talking about them. You have a first-round pick, a kid that had talent coming out of college, and right now he's making mental errors. I wonder if he can succeed in a big city. Do you think he could turn this thing around, or is this a lost cause at this point?
Honestly, Zach, I don't know. I don't know whether to give him credit or to wonder why after the game that he admitted that the pressure's getting them to him, because that's going to only add fuel to the fire for the fans that are infuriated with him. But I admire his honesty, certainly from as a journalist who was there. It's nice to have a guy actually be honest with you. But I mean, clearly, right now his head isn't on straight, and I don't know, what can be done in the short term to change that. And a lot of times with situations like this, you're right. It takes a change of scenery to get it right. But I mean, it's too late for that this season. This season it's just a matter of how often you put him out there, and can he give you something? What I think they need to do is kind of the same thing they did last year when they had a similar problem. I mean, they weren't getting anything from their outside receivers last year, but with Bradford in the second half of the season, he went to the guys he trusted. He went to Jordan Matthews, Zach Ertz, and Darren Sproles. They still have three very good weapons. I mean, you can win in this league without great wide receivers on the outside. You've seen that time and time again. A lot of times in New England, other places. Just kind of harping on the fact that they don't have anything out there isn't going to do them any good. They need to rethink this whole thing.
When it's so simple, when it comes down to just simplistics of catching a football, I wonder how you can even try to improve that. Sometimes you see guys get more reps after practice or stay a little bit later in that facility. You're around the Eagles a lot more than I am. How is Nelson Agholor's work ethic?
I mean, this kid, that's the irony of it. I mean, he's the hardest worker you're going to see.
Really?
It's one of the reasons Chip Kelly drafted him. I mean, I don't know if you recall last year after he was drafted, Chip made a big deal about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and how this kid, who comes from immigrant parents, grew up in South Florida poor, and they were both college graduates where they came from and worked janitorial jobs to raise a family, and this kid, this kid came from that, was a product of that environment and worked hard, and was never satisfied with where he was, whether it was in high school or USC, and same thing here. I mean, he works hard. I mean, he's out there at the jugs machine every day. I mean, the problem is it's kind of like a baseball player. You know, you've seen this occasionally. You saw it here for a while, for a brief while with Utley on throws to first base. It gets into your head. You start thinking too much about it when you're making a throw with him, when you're making a catch. You know, I mean, he presses so much now, I think, because he's so afraid of dropping it, that it's killing him. I mean, you know, Jordan Matthews drops more passes than he does, but Jordan Matthews lets it go and moves on and makes a big play the next time. This kid's letting it just pile on with him and letting it eat him away.
Now, I know it's early in the week and the game's not until Monday. Do you anticipate Paul Turner to be active on Monday night?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think you're going to see him play. You know, they're at a point now with a lot of these guys. I mean, they're 5-5. You know, realistically, they're probably not going to make the playoffs. But I mean, they're not going to. I mean, this isn't going to become just a let's play the rookies kind of thing. But you know, from the very start here, they've been trying to give young guys an opportunity to prove they belong going forward. And this, you know, they want to find out that about Turner. So I think they'll mix him in. You know, a lot as far as Aguilar, a lot's going to depend on the vibes that Doug Peterson gets from him over the next few days. They're off today, obviously, but they'll practice Wednesday and Thursday. I mean, if he comes in and he's a wreck, then, you know, maybe they say you're going to sit this one out. But I doubt it. What I think you'll see is both him and Paul Turner play on Monday night.
Paul Domowitch with us right now from the Philadelphia Daily News on the Zach Gelb Show. I had Joe Theismann on yesterday, and we were talking about Carson Wentz's play. And he said if anyone's critical of Carson Wentz after the game in Seattle, they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to football. Let me just run this by you. How do you draw a balance of being critical of Wentz in his rookie year and also knowing that, hey, this guy doesn't have a whole lot of talent around him?
Well, I mean, Joe's that's nice for Joe to say, but the kid's had his ups and downs. I mean, he doesn't have the greatest weapons around him, true. But I mean, if Joe looked at the game film, I'm assuming he bothered to do that on Sunday from Sunday's game. The kid made some mistakes. He made some poor throws, and he also made some great throws. You know, it was a terrific throw on that that screen pass to Ertz that was negated by Aguilar's penalty. I mean, you know, the kid's doing what you'd expect a rookie to do. He had that great start where he played 3-4 really good games, and now he's kind of leveled off, and you'll see some steps backward, you see some steps forward. You know, if that's being critical, then, you know, that's tough for Joe.
Paul Domowitch with us. So let's get to the opponent coming up on Monday. Packers defense, they were not impressive, to say the least, on Sunday night against the Redskins. Top 10 run defense, though, on the year. 22nd when it comes to defending the pass. 18th in total overall defense. What do you look at when you see this Eagles offense against a Packers defense that's not really been impressive this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good defense for them to be facing coming off that Seattle game because maybe they'll get a little bit of their confidence back. The problem is injuries. You know, they lost their right tackle, Vaitai, who has a MCL sprain, so he's going to probably out for 3-4 weeks. Alan Barber is moving over there from left guard. They should be okay with that move. Might even be better. I mean, Vaitai's been up and down too. So whether they can run or not, I mean, you know, they certainly it's going to be easier to throw on Green Bay, and I think you'll see them throw. But they don't want, and Peterson stated this several times. He doesn't want this kid throwing 45 times a game like he did last week or in some previous games. And I think that even goes for when you're playing a team like Green Bay that is weaker against the pass than it is the run. I mean, they want to be able to establish the run. It's what Peterson does with his offense. The problem is, you know, Ryan Matthews may or may not play because of his knee injury. Darren Sproles is going to be playing with a rib injury. So, you know, they're going to try and mix the run and the pass, but, you know, I think they'll be able to score points on Green Bay. It's just a matter of, you know, whether this gets it becomes a basketball game with Aaron Rodgers, you know.
What do you make out of Smallwood's play this year so far, what you've been able to see out of the rookie?
He's been pretty good. The kid's explosive. I think he looks like is going to be a decent pickup for them. He's got some things to learn. He's not the greatest blocker in the world, but he hits holes fast. He's been he has he's had a lot of big plays for them with very little work. They've been working him in. I think they need to give him more work and give Sproles less as a runner. I mean, Sproles should, they need to use him and exploit him as a receiver, just like New Orleans did. Guy's 33 years old. You don't need to be having him run 15 times a game, or he's going to be breaking more ribs. So, I've liked what I've seen from Smallwood so far. I don't know that he's going to be ever going to be a Pro Bowl back, but he's taken some positive steps.
Now, on the flip side, when we look at this defense for the Eagles compared to the Packers offense, it's really been a complete difference at home and on the road. On the road, they're a good unit. At home, they've just been dominant this year. What do you notice with the Eagles defense when they're at home? Because they've played some pretty darn good offensive teams and have won against all of them.
Yeah, their confidence just seems to be better at home. They seem to feed off the energy of the crowd. They've got some young players like Jalen Mills at cornerback, who I think is certainly a better player when the crowd's behind him than he is in a place like Seattle. He had some tough moments on Sunday, including, this didn't have to do with the pass, but he was the guy that kind of opened the door for that 72-yard run by C.J. Prosise for that touchdown that hurt him bad early. Had a couple of tough moments in coverage too. So, I just think it just has to do a lot with the crowd. I mean, this isn't the old vet where this crowd really is a big advantage, but I think still it helps when you're playing at home and you're a younger player.
Before we let you run, as Paul Domowitch joins us right now, I just want to run a few stuff by you with the Hall of Fame, since you're the representative in this area for the past 15 years. Dawkins, first ballot Hall of Famer, or does he get in on the first try?
I'd like to think so, but it's going to be tough. Right now he's got to get from 25 down to the final 15 that we talk about in the room the day before the Super Bowl. I'm hopeful that happens, because I think once we start discussing him, it's going to be hard for a lot of these voters to ignore how much of an impact he had on that position and on the Eagles. So I'm hopeful, but he's going to get in at some point here in the next few years. It's just given that Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu are coming up, and once you have position log jams, it can be a tough thing. It would be helpful for him if he could get in this year or next year.
Now, I was once talking to Mike Haynes at the Super Bowl, and he had to wait a while to get in the Hall of Fame, and he just told me, Zach, yeah, you're annoyed when you're waiting, but once you get in, it doesn't matter. I was surprised that T.O. didn't get in on the first try last year. Just take me through that process, though, because I don't think a lot of listeners know too much about it. When you get down to that final 15, what's that scene like the day before the Super Bowl? This year will be in Houston, so what's that scene going to be like in a few weeks?
Well, it's going to be interesting this year because we've got Paul Tagliabue as one of the contributor candidates, and he's a very polarizing guy. When he was a finalist under the regular system, before they added a separate contributor category, there was some heat. The discussions involving him were very heated, and I think the same thing's going to happen this year. And the same thing with Jerry Jones. I'm not quite sure why he's on the ballot this soon. I think Jerry eventually, I have no problem with him being a Hall of Fame candidate, just that they seem to be rushing him in. Same with Tagliabue, who right now is kind of he's the poster boy for concussions. I can't imagine why they decided it was a good idea to put him in, nominate him right now. But as far as the players, there's 15 modern era candidates. The first thing we do is discuss all 15. We go through the entire list, and then we reduce the number by a secret ballot from 15 to 10. And then if anybody has anything additional to add in discussion, we do that. And then we have another vote that reduces them from 10 to 5. and then we have a yes or no vote on the final five finalists, and each of them needs 80% of the vote to get in the Hall of Fame. As far as T.O. last year, I mean, he was, what I just said about Tagliabue was kind of what happened with T.O. last year. Very heated discussion. A lot of people felt he was too disruptive a player in the locker room and didn't deserve to go in at least this soon. I felt completely the opposite.
That seems really silly to me because I understand every writer that they have their, bias towards some specific players, but that seems silly to me. And that's why you're exactly right. That's why he was held out, and you know it better than anyone because you were in those discussions. But a guy like T.O., you look at the numbers, it's not even close.
No, it's not. And my point that I made to them with the disruption part was, I saw him at his worst. I mean, 2005, the year after the Super Bowl, he was a disruptive guy in the locker room. I mean, that was the one year when you could say, he was a very negative influence on the team. But if you look at every other team he played on, he was, San Francisco, he was, they made the playoffs and won 10, 11, 12 games because of him. The Super Bowl year with the Eagles, this guy came back 6 weeks after an injury that 95% of guys would never come back from, and goes and plays in the Super Bowl and catches 11 passes. So, I just felt it was nonsense to leave him out for that reason. I think this year or next year he gets in. I hope it's this year because it makes us look very petty, but we'll see what happens.
Have you ever had a player that was up to get into the Hall of Fame that you said, he wasn't the nicest of guys, so I'm not going to vote for him? Because I feel like some writers do that, like we're talking about with T.O.
Yeah, no, because we're not supposed to consider character or that. I mean, the problem with this T.O. situation is they felt it was okay to consider that because of the fact that it involved how it played out in the locker room and how it played out with the team. And that's why, my contention was, well, if you're making that case, it's a bad case because he didn't hurt teams. He might have been obnoxious. He might have been a diva, but 95% of the wide receivers are those things. He did not hurt teams. He helped them. So, but as far as, I never did. There's a lot of guys that I've come across in this game that I didn't particularly like, but all I'm considering is what they did on the field when I'm considering him as a Hall of Fame candidate.
I don't think he'll ever get in. It's an argument you could have, though. Does McNabb ever get in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, when he was when they retired his number here, Zach, about 4 years ago, I wrote a column. Timing might not have been great, but I said I liked Donovan. I liked him a lot. I covered his entire career, but I didn't think he was a Hall of Fame player. I thought he was a very good player, but great players get in the Hall of Fame, and I just, sometimes and at least in my case, I felt before he got traded to Washington, at that point I wrote that, he needed a couple more really good years for his numbers to get up there where they would be good enough to make a case for him for the Hall of Fame, and that never happened. He went to Washington, and it didn't work out there, and then he went to Minnesota, and it didn't work out there, and his career was over just like that. So, Donovan, the fact that he got his number retired here, I think, is probably the biggest honor he's going to receive.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's not a knock to call someone a good player, not a great player. Let me ask you, though, with Donovan, if he would have won that Super Bowl against the Patriots, is he a Hall of Famer then?
Yeah, in my mind, Zach, no, because, I think that one of the problems in that room is too much is put on one game, on winning a Super Bowl. Granted, he played poorly that game, and there was a lot of attention paid to the way it ended with him supposedly throwing up and taking too much time to get down the field on that last drive. He threw 3 interceptions in that game, which didn't help. But, the numbers still would have been the numbers, his career numbers, and they're just not good enough, in my mind, when you look at other players who are in there and some who are not, that have better numbers than him and don't deserve to be in. So I don't think that would have, at least in my mind, it wouldn't have made a difference in my feelings as far as him getting in. But maybe some others it would have. I don't know.
Now, I got two more for you just with some names. How about Tony Dungy? I know he got in last year. Did you think that was a little bit too early? Were you surprised that he got in that quickly?
Honestly, Zach, I was surprised he got in that quickly. I've been trying to make a case, and not just because he was the Eagles coach, but Dick Vermeil, I've been trying to at least get into the final 25. I mean, he won a Super Bowl. He accomplished one of the greatest turnarounds I've ever seen with, well, I wasn't here when it happened, but when he turned around an Eagle team without draft picks that was awful, and took them to the Super Bowl 5 years later before burning out, and then he retires and wins goes and wins the Super Bowl with the Rams. But I mean, I felt he deserved to be in a lot sooner than Tony Dungy. Tony, I mean, I think the fact that he's a terrific guy. He was a pioneer as far as an African American coach going to the Super Bowl. I think those things helped him. But I thought it was a little quick for him.
And last one for you, Paul Domowitch, and this is just because it's Packers week and I'm a football nerd. I've never seen him play, though, because that wasn't even a thought at the time when he was playing. But I do think it's a shame that Jerry Kramer, the longtime former Packers offensive lineman, is not in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if you've ever been on discussions with Jerry Kramer, but I'm just still shocked that he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, no, I have not. By the time I came aboard 15 years ago, he was already a guy that only the Veterans Committee could bring forward, and they have not done that. Why, I don't know. I mean, I think my guess, I've not had a lot of discussions with Veteran Committee players, voters about this, but I think that it got to a point where they just felt that with some of these great teams like the Packers, the Dolphins of the 70s, and the Steelers of the 70s, that some of these teams just kind of maxed out on the number of guys you can put in Canton. And I think that hurt Jerry as far as that's concerned, because he might have been more deserving than some of the guys that already are in there.
Yeah, it's a shame. This entire backfield's in the Hall of Fame, but the guy that did the blocking for them's not. But Paul Domowitch, excellent stuff. Enjoy covering the game on Monday night, and let's do it again real soon. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Paul Domowitch joining us right there from the Philadelphia Daily News. I love those Hall of Fame discussions, because an absolute joke that T.O. was not in the Hall of Fame in the first try last year. An absolute joke Jerry Kramer's not in the Hall of Fame. An absolute joke that Tony Dungy got in that quickly. You could throw around Tom Flores as well before Tony Dungy. A lot of interesting arguments you can make. Dick Vermeil, another name that should be in before Tony Dungy. Very interesting. And the fact that my confidant, as I like to call him, Jerry Kramer's not in the Hall of Fame, is a disaster and a real shame. He should be in the Hall of Fame. And I've interviewed Jerry many times. I've been advocating this immensely. Every year when I'm at the Super Bowl, we'll have a Hall of Famer on. We'll talk to someone that does Hall of Fame voting. And I go, why the heck is this guy not in the Hall of Fame? And I don't get really too many good answers. McNabb, not a Hall of Famer, though. Good, not great. And I've had that stance for a very long time. May not be popular with a lot of you, but the Hall of Fame is not for the very good. It's for the great. And there's a big difference. That's not a knock on Donovan. It's just reality. 609-919-9200. Zach Gelb Show. Time right now in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates Studios. 4:39. We'll take a quickie break. When we get back, we go from the NFL to a man that leads the nation in tackles for loss in college. Hassan Reddick of your Temple Owls joins us next. If the Owls win on Saturday, they're going back-to-back in the AAC East. Then we'll go to the conference championship game yet again. We'll be back.